The return to her door. The moment I saw her house again, my chest tightened the way it had that first day, like my lungs forgot how to breathe. The white fence hadn't changed. The roses still climbed over the gate in slow, patient curls, and the faint scent of lavender seemed to follow me up the path. It was strange how a place could hold so much power over you, how every step closer made my past tremble inside me like something fragile, trying not to break. It had been months since I last saw her. Months since I left that house, promising myself I'd never come back. But here I was again, with my heart pounding in my ears, clutching the small letter she'd sent, her handwriting elegant, deliberate, almost haunting in its simplicity. Return to me when you're ready to finish what we started. I didn't even know what that meant anymore. Was I ready? Had I ever been? The last time I walked out her door, I thought I was running toward freedom. Instead, I'd spent every day since replaying her words, her lessons, the mirror she made me face, not just the one that showed my reflection, but the one that revealed who I really was beneath the layers of shame, denial, and confusion. When I knocked, the sound felt louder than I expected. For a moment, there was silence. Then I heard footsteps, measured, graceful, the kind that made you stand straighter without even realizing why. The door opened. She stood there, exactly as I remembered, confident, composed, and so effortlessly in control that even the air around her seemed to obey. Her eyes found mine, and in that instant, I felt small again. Not in a way that belittled me, but in a way that stripped away the armor I had built since I left. "You came back," she said softly, her lips curling into a knowing smile. I tried to speak, but words tangled somewhere in my throat. I wasn't sure if I should. Her gaze swept over me, not cruelly, but analytically. "And yet, you did. That tells me everything I need to know." I swallowed hard. I needed to understand. What happened here? What you did to me? What I became? She tilted her head, studying me.
"What I did to you?"
Her tone carried a hint of amusement. "No, my dear. I didn't do anything to you. I simply showed you the truth you were too afraid to see." The truth. That word felt heavy, uncomfortably honest. Because deep down I knew she wasn't wrong. The days I'd spent here had changed me in ways I didn't want to admit. "Come inside," she said finally. "If you're ready to face what's left unfinished." The same words echoed in my mind, unfinished. I stepped across the threshold, and it was as though the world shifted. The faint smell of perfume and polished wood filled my lungs. The living room looked untouched, like time had politely waited for me to return. She gestured toward the same armchair I'd sat in before, and as I lowered myself into it, I realized my hands were trembling. "You've been running from yourself," she said, her voice calm, almost gentle. "Tell me, has that made you any happier?" I hesitated, then shook my head.
"No."
"If anything, I feel more lost." "That's because denial is a heavy thing to carry," she said, crossing one leg over the other. "It drags you down, no matter how far you try to escape it." Her words stung, but there was truth in them. I'd tried pretending the person she'd helped me see didn't exist. That the softness in my reflection was just a phase. That the emotions stirring inside me weren't real. "Why did you ask me to come back?" I finally whispered. "Because you're ready now," she said simply. "Ready to stop fighting what you are, and start becoming who you're meant to be." The room fell silent again. I could hear my heartbeat in that stillness, the sound of fear and curiosity colliding inside me. And as she stood and moved toward the hallway, the same hallway that had once felt like the beginning of something terrifying and beautiful, I realized something I hadn't before. I wasn't just here to face her. I was here to face myself. The mirror that remembers. The hallway seemed narrower than I remembered. Every framed photograph on the wall watched me as I walked, reminders of moments that didn't belong to me, but somehow felt familiar. My footsteps were soft, cautious, the air thick with the weight of memory. She led me toward the same room. I swore I'd never enter again. The door stood slightly ajar, and I could see the faint glint of light bouncing off the mirror inside, the one that had changed everything. Still afraid of what you'll see? She asked, her tone even, almost teasing. I hesitated in the doorway. I'm not sure if I'm afraid of what I'll see, or of what I'll feel. She smiled faintly. Good. That means you're not numb anymore. The room hadn't changed. The soft pink curtains, the polished vanity, the quiet hum of something delicate in the air, it was all the same. Even the chair, positioned perfectly before the mirror, waited like a ghost of my past self.
Sit, she said.
I obeyed before I even thought to resist. My reflection looked back at me, tired, uncertain, but different. The boy I had been wasn't gone, but he no longer dominated the image. There was something else now, something gentler, something that felt both alien and inevitable. She stood behind me, resting a hand lightly on my shoulder. Tell me, she said softly, when you look at yourself, who do you see? I stared at the mirror for a long time. Someone I don't fully recognize. Someone I don't know how to be. Then let's help you remember, she said. She opened the drawer of the vanity and placed something small in front of me, a simple tube of lipstick, the same pale rose color she'd made me wear once before. I don't. Sho. Her voice was quiet but firm. It's not about pretending. It's about listening. Let your reflections speak this time. I picked it up hesitantly. My hand trembled. The first time she'd done this, I'd felt humiliated, trapped in something I didn't understand. But now, as I uncapped it and brought it close to my lips, there was no command, no mocking. Just silence. The lipstick brushed my skin with a softness that felt almost forgiving. I traced the outline slowly, carefully, trying not to break the fragile calm that filled the room. And then I saw it, the smallest flicker of something real in the mirror. A quiet recognition. A feeling that didn't ask for permission. She leaned closer. You see her, don't you? My voice was barely a whisper. I think I do. Good, she said. Because she's been waiting for you to stop running. I looked down, blinking quickly, my chest tightening with emotions I couldn't name. I don't know who I'm supposed to be. Her hand brushed my hair back gently. You don't have to know yet. The truth isn't something you force, it's something you grow into. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, the quiet between us heavy, but not suffocating. There was understanding there, even kindness. She wasn't just the strict figure I'd once feared. There was something human in her eyes now, something that made me realize that maybe she wasn't trying to control me. Maybe she was trying to help me see. Finally, she said, you came here thinking this was about what I did to you. But deep down, you know it's about what you've been afraid to do for yourself. I met her gaze in the mirror. And what's that? To stop hiding. Her words landed softly, but deeply. And for the first time since I'd returned, I didn't feel like an intruder in this house. I felt invited. I looked back at the reflection, the faint pink lips, the uncertain eyes, the quiet heartbeat of someone caught between two worlds. And even though it scared me, I didn't look away. Because maybe, just maybe, it wasn't a disguise anymore. It was becoming a beginning. The lesson beneath the surface. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains like a quiet confession. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and coffee, and for a moment, I forgot where I was. My mind floated between memories, old routines, old names, old versions of myself that now felt distant, almost fictional. Then her voice called from downstairs, steady and unmistakable. You're awake. Come down. I hesitated, running my hands through my hair, realizing how differently I carried myself now. It wasn't that my reflection had changed overnight. It was that I had started noticing the change. Small things. The way I moved, how softly I breathed, the calm I didn't used to have. When I reached the kitchen, she was standing by the counter, stirring something in a mug. She looked at me, not as an authority, not as a figure of control, but as someone quietly taking note of who I'd become. You slept well, she said. I think I dreamed, I murmured. But I don't remember what about. She set the mug down and gestured to the chair across from her. Sit.
I did.
Then, without a word, she slid something across the table toward me. A small box, wrapped neatly in soft paper. I stared at it, unsure whether to open it or not.
Go on, she said.
Inside was a set of delicate brushes, makeup brushes, fine and pristine, arranged like instruments of art. These are yours now, she said simply. I blinked, confused. Mine? But… Because transformation, she interrupted gently, isn't about what someone else paints on you. It's about learning to hold the brush yourself. Her words hit me like a whisper and a thunderclap all at once. For so long, I had thought of everything that had happened here as something done to me. But she was slowly making me realize that there was another way to see it, something becoming of me. She stood and walked behind me, resting her hands lightly on my shoulders. Today, she said softly, you'll learn to see beyond your reflection. Not how others see you, but how you wish to be seen. I looked up at her. What if I make a mistake? She smiled faintly. Then you'll start again. That's what becoming yourself is. She left me alone in the quiet room, surrounded by soft light. My reflection waited patiently in the mirror on the opposite wall. I unrolled the brushes and took one in my hand, feeling the delicate bristles. My heart raced, not out of fear this time, but out of anticipation. As I touched the brush to my face, I didn't think of imitation. I thought of balance, expression. I wasn't erasing who I was blending it, layering it, softening the edges. It was strange how every movement of my hand told a story I didn't even know I remembered. The quiet strength of patience, the small thrill of recognition, the way color could speak more honestly than words. When I finally stopped, I looked up, and the reflection that met me wasn't foreign anymore. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. A quiet knock came at the door, and she stepped inside, studying me without speaking. Her gaze lingered for a moment before she said, "Now you're beginning to understand." "What do you mean?" She smiled, walking closer. "You're realizing that discipline isn't punishment. It's focus. It's care. It's the practice of becoming who you are, even when you don't feel ready." I swallowed hard, feeling my throat tighten. "It's harder than I thought." "Of course," she said softly. "Becoming honest with yourself always is." There was silence after that. Not heavy, just real. I felt like the air between us was holding something fragile and human, something neither of us wanted to break. Finally, she said, "Tomorrow we'll talk about confidence. Until then, just be." She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, I spoke. "Thank you." She paused, her hand on the frame. "Don't thank me yet," she said, not unkindly. "You're only beginning to see what's underneath." When she was gone, I sat there for a long time, my reflection flickering in the late afternoon light. I didn't know where this path was taking me, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel lost. I felt becoming. The test of confidence. The next day began with silence. No instructions, no summons, no soft voice from downstairs calling my name. Just sunlight crawling across the ceiling and the sound of my own breath, deep and uncertain. For the first time, I didn't know what she expected of me, and somehow that was more unnerving than any command. I got out of bed, brushed my hair, and caught sight of myself in the mirror. The face staring back was still mine, but the expression was new. It carried a calmness I couldn't fake anymore. When I finally went downstairs, she was already waiting by the door, holding a folded note and a set of keys. "You're going out today," she said simply. I froze.
"Out?"
"Yes." She handed me the note. "There's an errand I need done. It's simple but not easy." The note read, "Pick up the order from the shop on Elm Street. Ask for Lila's package." I frowned. "Why me?" She smiled faintly. "Because you need to see yourself through someone else's eyes. The world won't crumble if you step into it as who you are." I wanted to argue, to say I wasn't ready, that I didn't know who I was yet, but her tone left no room for retreat. I felt my stomach twist as she handed me a light cardigan and a pair of soft, casual shoes. "You'll be fine," she said quietly. "Confidence isn't pretending. It's trusting that the person you are deserves to exist." Those words stayed with me as I stood in front of the mirror one last time before leaving. The reflection wasn't flawless. My hands trembled slightly, my voice caught in my throat as I whispered to myself, "You can do this." The walk to Elm Street was both short and endless. Every sound, the rustling leaves, the chatter of strangers, the distant hum of cars, felt amplified. I walked slower than usual, keeping my head down, afraid of being seen. But halfway there, I caught my reflection in a shop window. For just a moment, I stopped. The sunlight fell across my face, catching the faint sheen of my hair, the softness of my expression. And I realized, no one was staring. The world wasn't watching me the way I thought it would. I took a breath, straightened my shoulders, and kept walking. When I reached the small boutique on the corner, the bell over the door chimed softly as I entered. The shop smelled of lavender and wood polish. Behind the counter stood a woman with kind eyes and streaks of silver in her hair. "Can I help you, dear?" she asked. My throat tightened. "I'm here for Lila's package." Her smile widened slightly.
"Ah, yes.
"Give me one moment." She disappeared into the back room, leaving me surrounded by soft fabrics and mirrors that seemed to breathe with color. I caught my reflection again, standing still, nervous but upright, not hiding. When she returned, she handed me a neatly wrapped parcel. "Here you go. Tell her she still owes me for the last one," she said with a wink. I couldn't help it, I laughed. It was small, but it felt real. "I'll tell her." As I turned to leave, she added gently, "You have a beautiful calm about you."
Don't lose that.
I froze mid-step, unsure how to respond. The compliment landed somewhere deep inside, where old insecurities used to echo. "Thank you," I whispered, and stepped back into the sunlight. The walk home felt different. The world didn't seem as sharp anymore. Every step was easier, every breath lighter. For the first time, I wasn't just thinking about how others might see me, I was feeling how I saw myself. When I returned, she was waiting in the doorway, arms crossed but eyes soft. "Well," she asked. I handed her the parcel. "It's done." "And how did it feel?" I hesitated. "Scary, but freeing." She nodded. "Then you understand the lesson." "What lesson?" "That confidence isn't loud," she said. "It's quiet. It's knowing you can exist without asking for permission." Something inside me shifted then, something subtle but irreversible. The walls I'd built so carefully began to crumble, not from force, but from acceptance. She stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You're beginning to look like someone who trusts her reflection." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm starting to." She handed me the next note, this one sealed. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "you'll learn what it means to belong." And as the door closed behind her, I stood there holding the envelope, feeling both terrified and alive. For the first time in my life, those two feelings didn't cancel each other out. They coexisted like truth. The meaning of belonging. That night, I barely slept. The sealed envelope sat on the nightstand like a secret I wasn't sure I wanted to open. Every few minutes, I'd glance at it in the dim light, wondering what tomorrow's lesson would ask of me. When the sun finally crept through the curtains, I sat up, took a breath, and broke the seal. Inside was a short note, written in her delicate handwriting. "Belonging isn't given. It's shared. Go to the garden behind the cafe on Pine Street at noon. You'll find what you're looking for." The simplicity of it unnerved me. There were no rules this time, no careful instructions, just trust. And the strangest part was, I wanted to trust her. The cafe was tucked away behind a line of old oak trees, half hidden from the main road. When I arrived, the midday sun was soft and golden, glinting off the windows like something out of a painting. The small garden behind it buzzed quietly with life, people sipping coffee, reading, sketching, talking softly in pairs. I stood at the edge, uncertain. I didn't know who I was supposed to meet or what I was supposed to do. But then I saw her, sitting at a small table under a wisteria vine, a book in her hand, and that same calm expression on her face. "You came," she said without looking up. I wasn't sure if I should. She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "That's why you needed to." I sat down, my pulse racing as if the world itself was listening. She closed her book and studied me for a long moment, Do you see all these people? She asked quietly. I nodded. Every one of them feels out of place in some way. But the ones who belong aren't the ones who fit. They're the ones who stopped apologizing for who they are. Her words sank into me slowly, like ink spreading through water. And you brought me here to learn that. She smiled faintly.
No.
I brought you here so you could feel it. She pointed discreetly to a young couple at a nearby table, a woman with short, cropped hair laughing with a man in a floral shirt. Their laughter was effortless, the kind that carried no self-consciousness. Do you think she worries about being seen? My mentor asked. I shook my head. That's because belonging isn't about being accepted, she said. It's about accepting yourself in front of others. I sipped the tea she'd ordered for me, its warmth steadying my hands. Around us, the murmur of voices felt almost like music. I wasn't used to being surrounded by strangers without wanting to shrink away, but somehow I didn't feel invisible or judged. I felt present. Then, without warning, she said, I want you to talk to someone. My heart skipped. What? Who? She nodded toward a small group sketching near the back fence. Tell them you draw too. Ask to join. I froze. I can't. You can, she interrupted softly. They don't need to know who you were. Just let them see who you are now. The seconds stretched painfully. My feet felt heavy as I stood, walking across the garden with my heart pounding in my ears. When I reached the group, one of them, a girl about my age with pain on her hands, looked up and smiled. Hey, she said brightly. You here for the art meet? I hesitated. I didn't know there was one. I just draw sometimes. Perfect, she said, scooting over to make space. Sit with us. And just like that, I did. No one asked where I came from. No one questioned my name, my voice, or my story. We just drew. Birds, faces, flowers, laughter. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about who I should be. I was just being. When I looked up, she was still sitting at her table, watching quietly. Our eyes met, and she gave the smallest nod of approval before returning to her book. As the sun dipped lower and the garden began to thin, I returned to her table. She didn't ask how it went. She didn't need to. She could see it on my face. You belong, she said simply. I think I finally do, I whispered. She smiled gently. Then today's lesson is complete. I hesitated, my voice barely audible. And tomorrow? She stood, brushing the wisteria petals from her sleeve. Tomorrow, she said, you'll learn to let go of the person you no longer need to be. The words sent a shiver through me, not of fear, but of inevitability. As we walked away from the cafe, I glanced back once more. The garden was glowing in the late afternoon light, full of quiet laughter and gentle noise. It didn't feel like another world anymore. It felt like home. The mirror and the name. When I woke the next morning, the air in my room felt different, lighter somehow, as if something unseen had already shifted. The note was there again, slipped neatly beneath the door. My fingers trembled slightly as I unfolded it. Today you'll learn the power of release. What you hold onto will hold you back. Come dressed as the woman you've begun to see in yourself. There was a small key taped to the bottom of the page. My pulse quickened. I knew this wasn't about clothes or appearance anymore. This was about identity, about what I was still afraid to accept. I opened the wardrobe she'd filled for me during those strange, transformative days. The dresses, blouses, and skirts now felt less like disguises and more like invitations. I hesitated before choosing a soft lavender dress that brushed my knees and shimmered faintly in the light. The mirror reflected someone I was still learning to believe in. My hands shook as I brushed my hair, applied the lightest touch of mascara, and stepped back. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I didn't feel trapped between two selves. I just felt present. When I arrived at her house, the door was slightly open, as if she'd known I wouldn't knock. Inside, candles flickered across the living room, their soft glow reflecting off an enormous mirror standing in the center of the floor. She was waiting beside it, dressed elegantly in black, her expression calm but serious. Close the door, she said quietly. Today's lesson is private. I obeyed, my heart racing as the latch clicked shut behind me. Stand in front of the mirror, she said. I did. The reflection staring back at me was familiar and strange all at once. Feminine, uncertain, trembling but strong. My throat tightened. She stepped beside me. Tell me what you see.
I
see someone who doesn't know who they are, I whispered. She shook her head. Look again. Don't describe what you were. Tell me what you are. My chest felt heavy. I swallowed hard, fighting the tears that wanted to rise. I see someone trying to let go. Her gaze softened. Then let her speak. What do you mean? She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small name tag.
Blank.
Write your name, she said simply. I froze. Which name? That's the lesson. For what felt like an eternity, I stared at the blank space. My old name hovered at the edge of my thoughts like a shadow, familiar but distant. Then another name whispered through me, one that had surfaced in my mind more and more lately, fragile yet full of promise. I wrote it slowly, every letter trembling under the weight of truth. When I finished, she smiled faintly. Say it. I hesitated, then whispered it aloud. The sound filled the room softly, but it struck me with the force of lightning. For the first time, I heard it as my own. She placed her hand gently on my shoulder. That's who you've always been. You just needed permission to meet her. My eyes burned as tears finally spilled down. But what if no one else believes it? She turned me toward the mirror again. Then you believe it enough for them. We stood there in silence. My reflection was crying, but the tears didn't feel like weakness. They felt like cleansing, like the quiet release of years spent pretending to be something I wasn't allowed to question. Then she whispered, Now take one last look at who you thought you were and say goodbye. The words hit deep. My voice shook as I whispered my old name, once, softly, almost like a prayer. Then I looked back up at the reflection and said, Goodbye. The sound of it broke something open inside me, a fragile, invisible wall I hadn't known was still standing. And behind it was light. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. You've spent so long learning to obey. Now it's time to learn to live. The candles flickered as if the air itself shifted. I felt lighter, my breath easier. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. As I left her house, I caught my reflection in the window. The person looking back wasn't a stranger anymore. She was me, stepping beyond the door. The next morning, there was no note. It was the first time all week that I hadn't woken to her handwriting, to her quiet commands that somehow guided my every breath. The absence felt louder than words. I sat up in bed, my heart thudding. Had it ended? Was I free? Or had I simply been released? For a while, I just sat there, staring at the keys still lying on my desk. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. I looked at my reflection in the mirror across the room. My hair still styled from the night before, the faint smudge of mascara beneath my eyes, and I realized something that chilled me. I didn't want to go back to how things were. I didn't want to be that frightened, uncertain boy who stumbled into his neighbor's life and ended up seeing himself in ways he never thought possible. I wanted to stay her, the woman I had discovered in the mirror. But how do you carry that discovery into a world that isn't ready to see it? By noon, my phone buzzed. It was a single text from her. Lesson 7. Walk outside as her. Alone. I froze, staring at the screen. No instructions this time. No specific outfit, no schedule. Just walk outside. It shouldn't have terrified me as much as it did, but it did. The idea of stepping out dressed as myself, as the person I'd finally accepted, made my pulse race. My mind spun with what-ifs. What if someone saw me? What if they laughed? What if they stared? What if I couldn't keep the courage alive once the door closed behind me? But beneath the fear, there was something stronger, a quiet voice that whispered, You can. I took my time getting ready. The motions felt almost sacred. A light layer of foundation, a soft touch of eyeliner, a casual pink blouse tucked into fitted jeans, simple but undeniably me. I never realized how powerful simplicity could feel when it was authentic. Standing before the mirror, I hesitated for one last second, my hand on the doorknob. I could almost hear her voice. Calm, assured, certain. Don't ask the world for permission to exist. I stepped out. The cool air brushed against my face, and the sunlight spilled over me like a quiet blessing. My legs trembled with every step, but I kept walking down the path, past the fence, onto the sidewalk. Each footfall was a victory, each breath a declaration. The first person who passed me looked up, a woman with a grocery bag, smiling briefly as our eyes met. It was just a small, polite smile, but to me, it meant everything.
She saw me.
And nothing happened. The world didn't stop. The sky didn't fall. I exhaled, trembling. I walked further, past the little cafe I'd always avoided, past the bookstore that used to feel too public, too exposed. I caught glimpses of my reflection in shop windows, in car mirrors, in glass doors, and every time, my heart stuttered. Not from fear, but from disbelief. This was me. When I finally stopped, I found myself standing at the park, the same one I used to pass daily without ever really seeing. I sat on a bench beneath a tree and let the moment sink in. People passed by, some chatting, some lost in their own worlds, none paying me any mind. And for the first time, I didn't want to hide. I smiled, a small, private smile that felt like a sunrise inside me. The wind tugged lightly at my hair, and I whispered my name under my breath, the one I'd claimed in the mirror. It felt soft, alive, real. That's when I noticed her. She was standing across the path, the mistress, watching quietly from a distance. Her arms were folded, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she nodded, once almost imperceptibly, before turning and walking away. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. That nod said everything. I'd passed the final test. Not by obeying her, but by becoming something that no longer needed her permission. The rest of the day blurred into sunlight and quiet joy. I bought a coffee. I laughed quietly at nothing. I caught my reflection again and felt whole. For once, I wasn't waiting for instructions. I was just living. That night, when I returned home, I found one last note slipped under my door. You don't need me anymore. But remember this. Discipline isn't obedience, it's devotion to your truth. I pressed the paper to my chest, eyes stinging. For the first time in my life, I wasn't anyone's project, or secret, or fantasy. I was simply me, and that was enough. The quiet that followed. When the 7th day ended, I thought the silence would feel like freedom. It didn't. It felt like standing on the edge of something enormous, something I'd never learned how to name. For a week, my life had been structured around someone else's voice, someone else's expectations, and in their strange, strict way, someone else's faith in me. Now, that voice was gone. The first morning alone, I wandered through my apartment like a stranger. The mirror still showed the same person, the same careful makeup, the same soft hair, the same clothes that once felt like a disguise but now just felt right. Yet everything around me felt wrong. Too quiet. Too ordinary. I realized that for the first time, I didn't have to be told to become her. I could choose to. I sat by the window, watching the light crawl across the floorboards. The world outside went on. Cars passing, neighbors laughing, someone walking their dog, all oblivious to how much had changed inside this single, small room. It hit me that I didn't miss the control. I missed the belief. Her belief that I could be more than my fear. That was the part one wanted to keep alive. So I made a quiet promise to myself. If she could see something worth shaping, then maybe it's time I do too. The next few days became a blur of learning who I was without the rules. I went for walks. Sometimes people smiled at me, sometimes they didn't. Once, a child pointed out my shoes and whispered something to his mom, and for a heartbeat, I felt my confidence wobble. But I didn't turn back. Each small act became a lesson. Buying coffee, talking to the barista, looking at my reflection in passing windows and not flinching. It wasn't about pretending anymore. It was about belonging. And slowly, I began to realize something profound. All along, it wasn't about what she made me do. It was about giving me the courage to do it on my own. One evening, as the sun melted behind the city skyline, I walked past her house, the one with the ivy climbing the red brick walls, the one that had changed everything. I stopped on the sidewalk and stared at her window, half expecting it to open, for her to appear with that familiar, knowing look.
But it stayed closed.
The silence felt different this time. Not empty, peaceful. I whispered a thank you into the fading air. Not to her, exactly, but to the version of myself she'd helped me find. Then I turned and walked away, not because I was running from the past, but because I finally had somewhere to go. That night, back home, I opened my journal and wrote one simple sentence. I'm not who I was, and that's my strength, not my secret. As I closed the book, I caught my reflection again, softer now, calmer, but with a spark in the eyes that hadn't been there before. Maybe transformation wasn't a moment. Maybe it was a series of quiet choices, made every day until they stopped feeling brave and started feeling natural. The final visit. It had been 3 weeks since I last saw her. 3 weeks since the silence began, the kind that doesn't echo but hums beneath your ribs, like a memory that refuses to fade. Every morning, I woke expecting to feel normal again. And every morning I didn't. Normal had become a stranger's word. I'd started living differently, more intentionally, more openly. I'd stopped hiding the makeup on my shelf, stopped double-checking if the curtains were drawn before dressing as myself. Some days were good. Others were harder. But even on the bad ones, I never once thought about going back. Still, part of me missed her. Not out of dependence, but gratitude. She had been the mirror I needed when I was too afraid to look at one. So one quiet evening, when the light was gold and soft and the streets were almost empty, I found myself walking back to her house. I didn't plan it. My feet just carried me there, as if something unfinished still waited between us. The house looked smaller now. Not because it had changed, but because I had. The ivy had grown thicker over the fence, the porch lights glowed dimly, and the familiar scent of lavender drifted from the garden. I stood there for a long while, unsure whether to knock. Then the door opened. She was there, calm as ever, her gaze steady, her posture elegant, in that effortless way that used to intimidate me. Only now it didn't. "Hello," I said quietly. Her lips curved into a faint smile. "I wondered when you'd come back." For a moment, neither of us moved. The silence felt full, not with tension, but understanding. "I didn't come for instructions," I said. "I just wanted to say thank you." She stepped aside, motioning for me to enter. The air inside was warm, the faint scent of perfume familiar and grounding. Everything looked the same, yet I saw it differently now. The furniture, the shadows, even the way light fell across the floor, it all seemed smaller compared to the enormity of what had happened inside me. She watched me as I stood there, my hands folded in front of me, unsure of what else to say. "You've changed," she said softly. "Not just how you look, how you stand." I smiled, a little embarrassed. I guess I finally stopped asking permission.
"That's what I wanted," she said.
Not obedience. Awareness. I met her eyes then, truly met them. The strange authority she once held over me was gone, replaced by something equal. Respect. Connection. "I thought you were trying to control me," I said. "But maybe you were just trying to show me how to stop controlling myself, through fear." She didn't answer right away. Then, with that quiet confidence I remembered, she said, "Discipline was never about punishment. It's about shaping intention. And now you have yours." The words lingered like a gentle echo. I nodded slowly, realizing she was right. Everything she'd done, every uncomfortable moment, every challenge, it had been a mirror reflecting what I was too afraid to admit. I had always been this person.
She didn't create me.
She revealed me. When I finally left her house that evening, the air was cool and clear. The sky glowed in fading orange, the city lights blinking to life one by one. Each step I took felt lighter, freer, not because I'd escaped something, but because I'd returned to myself. At the corner, I paused and looked back. She was standing in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim light behind her.
We didn't wave. We didn't speak.
But somehow, that silence said everything. The lesson was complete. When I got home, I sat by the mirror, the same one that once showed me confusion and fear. Now it showed peace. I brushed my hair back, touched the edge of my jaw, and smiled faintly at my reflection. For the first time, I didn't see someone pretending. I saw someone becoming, and I realized something I'd never understood before. Transformation isn't about escaping who you were. It's about forgiving that person and carrying them forward into who you are meant to be. That night, before bed, I whispered one last thought into the quiet room. Thank you for showing me how to choose myself. The wind outside rustled the curtain softly, and I could almost hear her voice, fading into memory. You always could.